Our next part of our program, as I mentioned, is the career panel. The Dona Crawford, who is our board chair of Livermore Lab Foundation and the creative mind behind a lot of what we do here, especially this Girls Who Code Big program. And she's going to be moderating the panel for us. So Donna, I'm going to hand it over to you next.
Thank you, Sally. Of course, this is when I lose my voice. Welcome to our career panel. This is such an inspiring way to wrap up our workshop. We have the bios of all our panelists in the welcome packet that we send out to all the students. So I'm not going to go into details about each of our panelists, but you will find that you are in the presence of some amazing women, and I see them all here. And I don't know that we can, well, we'll spotlight them, or when they speak, you'll see them a little better. I'm going to give you a thumbnail sketch in alphabetical order in case you haven't yet read their bios, but they'll tell you more about that later. So in alphabetical order, Lisa Belk heads the Information Technology Operations Division at Livermore Lab, and that's a 220-person division. And when Lisa entered college, it was not her intent to seek out a career in a technical field. She studied economics and earned an MBA. So when it's her turn, you should ask her more about that. Sara Bly has a computer science PhD from Davis in sound and information presentation, which is rather interesting. She started the Livermore Conflict Simulation Lab in 1979 and managed it until 1972. And then she transitioned into something very interesting, doing qualitative user studies. And one of the studies had to do with teenagers and instant messaging. So, what do you think she knows about your social media habits? Trish Damkroger is Vice President and General Manager of the High Performance Computing Organization in the Data Platforms Group at Intel. And she is currently responsible for delivering the US exascale system to Argonne National Laboratory in 2021. I think you heard a lot about that this week. She was recognized in HPC Wire's People to Watch not only once, but twice. So I said in the bios, are you watching? Louisa Hanson is a physicist at Livermore. She started work there in 1959. More than 60 years. She received her BS in math with a minor in physics in her native country in Chile before coming to the United States to get her PhD. Louisa has published upwards of 200 papers in her 60 years at the lab and has presented those papers in France, in Germany, in Russia, Japan, and China. Can you imagine such a long and illustrious career? Last but not least, I'm just doing this in alphabetical order, Claire Max is the Bachman Professor of Astronomy and Astrophysics at UC Santa Cruz. And she is also there the Director of the University of California Observatories. In addition to her numerous awards, she is also co-founder of an initiative which advances Hawaii college students into high technology workforce and is faculty liaison for education and public outreach at the Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton in California, which probably factored prominently into the recent Nobel laureates in physics. So you might ask her what she knows about them. She probably knows them personally. So we're delighted that she showed up, given all that's going on in that this week. So that's the thumbnail sketch of our panelists. Let's get started. I'm going to ask a question and have each panelist respond. Then I'll ask another question and have each panelist respond. Feel free to turn your mics on and ask questions, or just put things in chat if you want clarification, more detail, follow-up. Each speaker will have, a couple of minutes to respond to each question, and then hopefully there's time left for additional questions. So hopefully everybody is ready, and you are all co-hosts if you ever want to share your screen and show something. I think I saw some of that was going on while I was making introductions. First question. You have these fabulous bios. In short form, what is it that your job entails and why do you love it? I was going to not go in the same order every single time unless that's what people are comfortable with, but what I see on my screen, I see, is it okay, Louisa? I see you first. If you turn your microphone on, please. Louisa, your microphone is on mute.
I go to the next person and maybe, yeah, there, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Very good. The question was why I love what I do or something of that sort.
What your job is, and why you love it.
Yes. As you said already, informed already, I am a nuclear physicist, and that involved to be I started by being an experimentalist. That means to do a lot of measurements, a lot of experiments to learn more about nuclear matter, components, interactions, etc. Now, as time goes by, new problems start to appear and you start slide to change fields. Not change fields, that's not true, but other look at the same field from a different point of view. And for example, for the last 20 years, I will say that got very much involved in nuclear defense, which, as you know, nuclear physics is the base of many of those problems. Later on, I have drifted from experimental to calculations. And just now I am involved almost 100%, I would say, in calculations, where I use the big computers that all these young students were talking about with such much excitement. Well, I would like very much to know as much as they are talking now, but I am a user of those computers. And of course, a good user is supposed to know something about also. And I guess that that's more or less the answer to that question that you had, except you. I will stop there.
Thank you, Louisa. I'm gonna just go on to the next screen, and if chat comes up, I'll try to monitor that as well. The next person I see on my screen is Sara Bly. Sara, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me be here. It's a little scary that I started at Lawrence Livermore Lab before all you students were even born, but fortunately, two of the people on the panel were here when I was here too, so I'm not the only one. I started as a programmer and I loved it. I had been a math major and I really loved programming. I could get completely lost in the challenge of it and the creativity and the problem solving. I actually liked debugging because I felt like there was always an answer. That may not be so true today, but it was then. I was ultimately responsible, as they said, for building the conflict simulation lab. And I thought I'd show you a picture from then because it probably doesn't look like anything you're seeing these days. We had one of the very first graphics frame buffers and you know, that's the way it was. But as Donna already said, and I know the conflict simulation lab, I believe, still exists today, but it's far more sophisticated than this was then. I went from programming to a focus on user interfaces, actually while I was still at the lab. And then I went from the lab to Xerox and to their research center at Park. And when I was at Park, I got involved with a group that was doing collaborative technologies. It seems a little bit funny right now, but these are things that we were doing back in the 80s that now, of course, you know, are the big deal with FaceTime and Skype and Zoom. We actually connected people in Portland, Oregon and Palo Alto, California. And we just used regular old monitors and all of our offices were connected. And then we eventually did an application called Portholes that connected Cambridge, England and Palo Alto, California. And it kind of even looks like Zoom, I would say, today. So eventually I needed to understand what we were doing. So that's when I had the privilege of getting to work with some anthropologists and adapting their ethnographic methods to user experience studies. And that was also a passion of mine. I loved that. I loved working with collaborative work, and I loved working with the structure of computing. I think programming was a fabulous basis, and I'm still glad that I had that. And then that let me expand and broaden into understanding what users are doing and how people could collaborate.
Thank you, Sarah. I should probably give you guys a heads up because you don't know what order I see you in, but you're doing fabulous. And Trish will be next, and then I see Claire, and then I see Lisa, at least for this round. And so in a couple of minutes, Trish, what is your job really, and why do you love it?
Okay, thanks, Donna. So I joined Intel 3.5 years ago to run the high performance computing organization. And it's a combination of the business aspects along with the engineering and so there's the deep technical with the business. And that's really why I love it. I mean, there's just a lot of deep understanding of how your technology impacts the people that are buying it, and knowing why they would pay for this versus the other. So it's just a very different, I came from Lawrence Livermore where it was more technology based, and this has given me that opportunity to really look at a different facet. But it's, as Donna said, we're responsible for delivering exascale systems all the way down to delivering cloud-based systems for high performance computing like you used for this week to do your work. And so there's a wide breadth to the job, but also it all focuses around meeting your customer needs. And I have a real passion about figuring out how to solve those difficult puzzles of what the customer needs and bring it to them in a timely way.
Cool, thanks, Trish. I'm not seeing any questions in chat, so we're going to move on to Claire. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. So I'm an astronomy researcher. I am a professor. I like to observe with big telescopes, and my own research right now is on colliding galaxies and what happens to the giant supermassive black holes in the middle of each galaxy when the two galaxies crash together. And I do that using technology that I played a big part in getting on the telescopes and to some extent inventing, which is called adaptive optics. So you might have noticed that stars twinkle, but worse yet, images at the back of a telescope not only twinkle, but they get blurry. And adaptive optics measures the turbulence in the air, which is what blurs the image, and corrects for it so that it's not blurred anymore when it gets to the camera. And we use laser beams to help that out. We can talk about that at some point if you'd like. And I just wanted to say that I developed this at Livermore, and Livermore, in addition to great computing, has great laser expertise. And I don't think I could have done it anywhere else. People were willing to listen to crazy ideas and go for it on the chance that it really could revolutionize things. And for those of you who have been paying attention to the Nobel Prizes this week, the two of the three people who got the Nobel Prize for studying black holes did it using this technology. And in the case of Andrea Ghez at UCLA, using the technology that I helped to put on the Keck telescopes. And I just want to show you, it's a pretty weird scene when you're looking at a laser coming out of a giant telescope. I don't know, can you see that?
Yes.
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 So there are two Keck telescopes, they're at 14,000 feet. And both of them are looking at the center of the galaxy, which is where Andrea Ghez looked at in order to characterize this 4 million solar mass black hole in the middle of the galaxy. So that's kind of amazing. I'm also, what I'm really paid to do these days is to be the director of an organization called the University of California Observatories, which provides telescopes for any UC researcher to use. And that involves Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton near San Jose, which almost but didn't burn down last month. And the Keck Observatory, and hopefully eventually the 30-meter telescope observatory.
Very cool. Last but not least, Lisa, if you would tell us what is your job and why do you love it?
Hi, Donna. Hi to all of the participants. Thanks for having me here today. So I also work at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. I'm a division leader in our computing directorate, and I lead a team of 220 employees. And our job is to ensure that all 8,000 employees have the software and the computer support that they need to get their job done. So we work on laptops, servers, and networks that have anywhere from regular information that you'd put on the internet all the way out to secret government information. And I thought it was really exciting to hear that you learned a little bit more about the insides of computers this week. I love having a positive impact, not just on the employees that are in my division, but knowing that the work that we're doing to make sure that everyone's computers are running successfully and they get all the software that they need, knowing that we're actually touching all of the really cool science projects that are being done at the laboratory to help keep the nation safe.
Very cool. So you see, we have some amazing women here. I'm still not seeing any questions in chat. So we'll move on. On this next round, I'm going to go in alphabetical order. And that was the order I introduced you. That means, Lisa, you get to go first this time. So what do you know now that you wish you had known in high school and that might have made a difference?
Yeah, so I wish I had known what credibility comes with getting a college degree in a STEM field. So I learned as an adult that people have so much respect for those who have majored in, a wide variety of science, technical, engineering, math topics. And I wish that I had stuck with the computer science degree that I was originally going for. I switched over to economics. I loved it. Lots of great math, and I've been able to use those skills throughout my career. But I wish I had known this type of credibility that comes from earning a college degree in a STEM field, and that credibility will follow you throughout your career and really help to open doors, whether you decide to pursue a very technical route or go down a business route.
So Sara is next. Oh, there she is. I lost you for a minute on my screen. I thought, where did you go?
I'm right here. I wish I'd known that it was okay to explore more. I think I felt like I needed to learn something and do it. And I wish I'd known that it was okay to explore more. At the same time, I'm really glad that I had a basis, in my case, in mathematics, as well as computer science, that didn't lock me in, that it gave me a lot of ability to expand in a variety of directions, but that I had that foundation. I think that kind of builds a little bit on what Lisa just said. I think an important thing is to expect change. I always thought it was a joke about being a professional student, but I became one. So expect change. The job I had by age 30 didn't exist when I was in high school and college. And certainly the technology didn't. So at the same time, look for your passions. I thought, I needed to do something to earn a living, which I did back in that day. But I wish I'd paid a little more attention to the things that I just loved. And finally, I'd say to all of you, have faith in your confidence. Pay attention to the things you're succeeding in. Even though those days, where you may feel like you're the weird one, maybe none of you ever do. I hope you don't. But if you do, have confidence and enjoy some good friends along the way.
Great advice. Trish?
So I think for me, and it really goes along with what Sara and Lisa have already said, is I thought it was such a big decision of what you're going to major in college. And, you know, I spent a lot of time really trying to figure out that perfect college or that perfect degree. And I'll be honest, I switched it 3 times in college. So you're going to change. You're going to find different things that interest you. And so be willing to go through that process and let yourself evolve as you go along. I also think I view college, and even when I interview recent grads from college, I really look at that they have got a foundation in how to solve problems. And they also have just that basic foundation in math and science, you know, for the STEM field. But really, it's the problem solving that I look for and the ability to work with others. So that's how I hire now. And so looking at that, and then I think also, as Sara said, what I have a master's in electrical engineering. I don't use a lot of that today, 30 years later in my job. I use a lot more software, you know, that I've learned along the ways, a lot more about high performance computing, obviously, and just a lot of people skills, business skills, et cetera. So you got to continue to grow and learn. So I agree, Sara, you're always going to be a student as you grow through your career.
Thank you, Trish. Louisa, I want you to answer the same question, but in addition, there's a question for you in the chat from Hershey. She wants to know how you started your work at the lab. So if you could talk to us, what do you wish you had known then? And also, how did you get started working at the lab?
Well, answering your second question first, why? I graduated with my PhD from the University of California in Berkeley, from UC Berkeley, okay? My husband already has got a job at UC Berkeley. Then in those years, 1959, husband and wife were not advised to be working at the same place. For that reason, I had to choose other places. Stanford was my second choice, but Stanford was building the accelerator and was going to be ready in, assume that this was November, in 1 year. And I thought to wait 1 year to start to work is too long for a scientist. For that reason, I went to Livermore. Honestly, my first reaction to Livermore, I didn't like Livermore. And I'm going to be honest. Coming from Berkeley, a liberal place, in everything open, everything discussion, etc., arrived to a place where fences, guards, etc., was something that really was not in my personality. But you get used to everything in life. And second, if you find a good interest in work, research, like I start to do in Livermore, those feelings start to disappear, or at least went into the background. And the fact that went into the background is that I was 60 years that I've been there. Then that's answer to the second questions, okay? Regarding the first question that was answered by the other, I think that was a kind of a pathological student because I have exactly the same grade in everything, from math to gymnastics to languages, etc. Then what I'm going to choose? My first choice was medicine. That was my first choice of a career. But at that time, again, was in Chile, I'm talking in Chile when I graduated, was too expensive. And I was the oldest of my siblings. Then my parents say, no, that's too much, choose something else. Okay, I will choose engineering. Engineering, who will believe a woman engineer in those years? Nobody. My father said, forget it. Somebody else will sign all your projects and your name will be in any place. Very well. Then what was my life? Then I decide, okay, what I am? I am memory, since I am history, philosophy, whatever, chemistry, I am memory, or I am intelligence. I choose math. Because for me, math was the only thing that tells you that you really knows how to reason, how to deduct, etc. And I choose math. And then I went into mathematics and physics as a second choice. But life has many things. I start to find out in the summer were not jobs for mathematicians, were a lot of jobs for physicists, anything technician, you could get a job in the summer. Well, and since you had to be practical, I went into physics. Then it was almost for default, I went into physics. But like again, you start to find out that there are very, very interesting problems. And that you start to discover that, well, the fact that you didn't know about this before was maybe that you didn't care either. But now you are working, doing experiments, etc. Then I think that that's answer the question.
Thank you. Claire, you're next.
Well, I think I didn't know when I was in high school and most of the time in college that you didn't have to sit alone in a lab in order to be a scientist. And so today being a scientist is frequently, not always, frequently collaborative, and you're in a partnership of some sort. And social skills and leadership skills really matter. And I like being with people. And so it was a very nice realization that it wasn't the stereotype of the man in the white coat sitting alone in the lab with a Bunsen burner or whatever they have these days. And related to that, in high school, I didn't know that I would become a good leader. It turns out I'm a pretty good leader, and it took me about 10 years after my PhD to realize that I enjoyed it and I was good for it, and people seemed to wanted me to lead things. So I guess there were hints in high school, you know, I was the head of some club, the astronomy club or something. But sometimes you have to grow into skills over a period as long as 10 years before you realize that that's really something that is pleasing and exciting.
Great answers. The third question, you've somewhat already answered it. The question I posed to the panel was, if you were heading to college today, what would you focus on? And you've already heard from them that, you know, in some sense, it's more the logic and the reason and the way to think about things that's more important than the actual topic. And maybe you would answer the second part of the question that I had sent you was, what's the hot new technology, or what's the job on the horizon? You know, we hear a lot about, oh, the robots are going to take our job, AI is going to take our jobs. So what is the hot new skill that everybody needs? And for this round, I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order. That means, please, Claire, you go first.
Oh my goodness. I'm just going to speak about astrophysics because that's mostly what I know. I think the hot new technology on the horizon in astrophysics is big data and data science and understanding all sorts of things about what big data can tell you and how to dig out from large amounts of data the answer to the question that you want to know. And in astronomy, that was brought about only once there were telescopes that could see a big enough part of the sky at the same time that they were getting lots and lots of objects to talk about, thousands or even millions of galaxies, for example. Whereas before that kind of telescope came into being, you were talking about 5 or 10 or 15 objects at once, which is hard to make a generalization based on. So my insight, at least for this one.
I heard some other background noise. Was you were finished, Claire?
I'm done.
Okay, then I'm going to go back to Louisa. What do you think students listening today should be focused on for career of the future?
Well, I will follow what Clara Max just said. For me, astrophysics is the field of the future. is where more things can be discovered, great things that they just start to show in the horizon. Then for that reason, I will advise the students look into that path, astrophysics. And for that, seems that the period of very large telescopes has a limit, and then you see this plantation of telescopes like in the north of Chile, where they have, I don't know how many, but there are at least 40, 60, and maybe Clara has a better number that I have of telescopes that are at this moment all gather information, and then this information is combined or analyzed that give a wide field of what is being seen. Then telescopes, excuse me, these things is just telescopes and computers undoubtedly to analyze all the data, because the amount of data is unbelievable. And for that reason, those two technologies has to be developed, continue developing. That's all.
Trish.
So I have to say high performance computing, of course. And when the definition for high performance computing as we're moving forward is not just modeling and simulation, but includes high performance data analytics and artificial intelligence at scale. And it is Louisa just saying all that data, you need high performance computing in order to make intelligence out of all of that data. So I do think that is just going to be fundamental to all the advances moving forward.
Sara.
To be honest to what I first said about the fact that, you know, the job that you end up having in probably even 10 years, you can't even visualize today. I don't know that I would make a particular prediction, but I think if I were going to college today, I would probably double major so that I had my programming, my computer science, and something else that interested me, because technology is just in everything right now. So there's technology in medicine and work practices and social interactions, which is a big love of mine, how technology can support social interactions. Thank heavens it is now. Climate change, so things like quantum computing. A particular love of mine right now is 3D printing, because I think we haven't even just started to see what 3D printing can do for us. So I would take some other interest and combine it and then just see where it goes.
And Lisa.
So I think it's really, really interesting that there's been a trend in the answers here. Donna had asked us these questions ahead of time, and I listed that if I were starting today, I think I would pick a career in data science. So I think there's definitely a trend here, just so much data to work with, whether whether you're using high performance computing or using it for, the additive manufacturing. I think that I would really like the analysis and the critical thinking part that goes along with data science. And I think it's a hot career that will continue to grow as the amount of internet usage continues to grow as well. It's not a career that existed when I was in college. And I think that it would be a really nice intersection of computer science and statistics. I loved statistics, and I really wanted to love computer science, but the software development wasn't really my thing. I think I was pretty good at it, but I just couldn't get into building the applications, and I didn't understand the breadth of what the computer science discipline had. So I really think that data science is cool because you can combine that with statistics. And I'd also like to throw out that cybersecurity is a really hot topic right now. I can't hire enough cybersecurity people, which is very different than than even 5 years ago. And what I like about cybersecurity is that you can go down a very business-focused route in cybersecurity, working on policy, working on audits, or you can go down a really technical route with cybersecurity and finding vulnerabilities and figuring out how the bad guys are trying to intrude and get the data. Again, we're back to data. You know, if the bad guys are trying to get the data from your company. So I'm also a big fan of the data science side.
Well, I hope you, the students are taking notes. You know, I'd like to go back and start all over again. It sounds really exciting. I want to do some of this again. Thank you. The last pre-forwarded question is, what is the best or worst advice that you received and why, or some inspirational quote? And after we go through this round, if you have questions for one another or anybody besides students, we can make it interactive. And just for the students, we have some wrap up and some swag for you. So if that'll entice you to make sure that you stay on. I know it's been a long week, but so with that, I'm going to start in the middle of the screen. I'm going to start with Trish. And what was the best or worst advice you received, or some inspirational quote that get you up and get you going? You're on mute. That's, by the way, a new phrase in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Yes. You're on mute, yes. And it happens a lot because I had barking dogs, which is another problem working from home. So I think I'm going to take a combination of all this. I think the absolute worst advice I ever got was, you're just a girl, you can't do that. But the best advice I got from my parents, and that was from teachers, from my parents was, if you work hard enough, you can do anything. And I think when I really come down to, for inspiration, I really look at Nelson Mandela's quote of, it always seems impossible until it's done.
That's great. I'm gonna move this way, Claire. Yeah, I know, you don't know what order I'm going in. Keep it moving.
This is more the worst advice, and then I have a little, hopefully good advice, but in grad school, we had to do a theoretical project 1 year and an experimental project in second year. So for my, and they chose the project for you. So I worked on a theoretical project with a very famous professor who chose a really boring calculation for me to do, really boring. And I just hated it. I hated working on it, so I didn't work on it very much. And at the last few weeks, I threw something together for a report. And so at the end of the year, he wrote a letter into my official grad student file that somebody after that gave to me. And it said, I was such a weak student that he doubted I would ever get my PhD. And if I did get my PhD, I certainly wouldn't ever amount to much as a researcher. And I have to confess that when I was on the big stage at the National Academy of Sciences, being inducted into the Academy, which is a pretty rare thing, I thought of him. See, you know, you never know. And just because you don't feel inspired working on one thing doesn't mean that you're not good at something else. And so I had two thoughts. One of them has actually made a fair amount of difference to me. It's, and you may have heard it, it's called fake it till you make it. So you come up with an idea, or somebody else gives you an assignment and you think, oh God, this is impossible, I'll never do it. Or I'm not really competent in this area. But you know, the idea is you tell yourself, you know, you're lying to yourself, okay? You tell yourself, I can do this, even though you don't believe it. And you just plug away at it, and after a while you get more and more confidence, and in the end, it turns out you can do it, you can make it. And you know, I'm pretty far along in my career, and I still find that helpful. Somebody asks you to do something. And the other thing that I was thinking about with regard to the Nobel Prize winner that I know, Andrea Ghez from UCLA, is she had this idea to look at the center of our galaxy and try and find a black hole back in the mid-1990s. And it took 25 years to get to the point where she could really prove it. and won a Nobel Prize for it. And people all along will tell you, and I had the same kind of thing happen to me with this technology that corrects for turbulence in the atmosphere. It'll never get on a big telescope. It'll never work reliably. And sometimes things take a decade or two in the area of research. And if you stick with it, that's not to say you shouldn't do something else on the side just in case. But if you stick with it, you can get a lot done. And you know, in my field, there's a publisher perish aspect. If you're a researcher at a university, you have to publish a certain number of papers a year, or that you won't get tenure, or you won't get promoted. And that's not conducive to sticking with something for 25 years. But I think it really pays off.
Excellent advice. I'm going to Lisa next.
Lisa?
Okay. So the best advice I received was during my MBA program. I was at the University of Notre Dame, and we had a special women's luncheon that was sponsored by the graduate school, which I thought was really great. And we were told to always, without question, negotiate when accepting a job, even if you think the job offer was fair. And the reason for that is that the men are negotiating. So it's part of our responsibility as women to help close that wage gap. And one of the ways that we can do that is to always negotiate. Now, you're not always going to successfully negotiate. When I came to the laboratory, I tried to negotiate. They said no. I still took the job, but I had successfully negotiated for my first job after graduate school, and I've negotiated at different points along the way. And it doesn't just have to be about your salary. You can negotiate for start dates. You can negotiate for trying to get more vacation time. I mean, you have to do your research so that your negotiation makes sense. But we all know that there is a wage gap, that women are paid less than men, and there are so many contributing factors, but one of them we have control over, and that is putting forth our best foot and letting the employer know what we think we're worth and that we've done the research. And the employer has already invested in you by the time they make that job offer. They've already pictured your face in that role, so they won't be offended if you ask, as long as you do it professionally. And then either it works or it doesn't work, but at least you tried and you get to feel good about that. So I thought that was the best advice. The worst advice, I think, aligns very much with what the others have said. I was asked about 9 years ago what my career aspirations were, and I said that I wanted to be an information technology or IT manager. And I was told by my supervisor that that was not in my future. And that I did not have, that I just didn't have the right background for it. I didn't have the right degree. And for all these reasons, it's not in the cards for me. So 1 year later, I became an IT manager in a different area. And actually a few years later, I was promoted and came back into the same role that my supervisor had been in. So you have to believe in yourself. You have to say to yourself, these are my goals, and what do I need to do? Because I have to take responsibility for where my gaps are. So what do I need to do? Let me be honest with myself, and then work hard so that I can fill in those gaps and get the qualifications that I need. And I really resonate with that idea of someone putting a fire under you and really spurring you to achieve your goals. And absolutely, I'm a big fan of fake it till you make it, because sometimes you end up with those promotions and you're, at least I've thought to myself, what have I gotten myself into? But then you take a deep breath and you say, I'm a good team member. I'm a good leader. I'm going to align with these wonderful people on my team. They are experts in their field. And as a team, we're going to make this happen. And they raise you up. And I think it's so important for you to build a network of women and men as well who are allies. And then each of you should be pushing the other one. Hey, I saw a promotion. I thought you'd be great for that. And then they'll talk themselves out of it, say, no, it's too much for me. I'm not qualified. But you're going to say, yes, you are. And I want to see you go for that. And I've had a group of women that have been so supportive, and we have each been promoted at least once by pushing the others along and saying, I picture you in this role. Go for it.
Excellent. Sara.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. I'm a little horrified that Clara and Lisa had the worst story, kind of like mine. I was hoping that we didn't all have those stories, but it was 2 days before my qualifying exam when I was working on my PhD, and one of my committee said I wasn't going to pass it. Now, this was 2 days before my qualifying exam. It pretty much destroyed I did pass the qualifying exam, just as all these other people have said, but it pretty much destroyed the after effects when you're supposed to celebrate. I said, forget it, I'm leaving, which was too bad. But anyway, the best advice was before that, and it was actually far more important. When I was in school, I grew up in Kansas, and I was at the University of Kansas, and quite frankly, in my era, unlike Louisa, who is obvious of my era also, and was smart enough to know she could go into science, I thought you had to be a teacher or a nurse. And I wasn't into people getting sick, so I was going to be a teacher. And at the University of Kansas, that was your undergraduate degree, was in education. And my math professor stopped me in the hall one day and said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to go into education my junior year. And he said, no, don't do that. He said, get your degree in math, and then you can go to Stanford or Harvard for your education degree. And I said, okay. And so I did. And I'm so glad that my undergraduate degree is in math, because that gave me the freedom to move to other kinds of fields more easily. So, start where you are. Don't be afraid of starting where you are, and then aim for something you don't know. Keep an open mind. Enjoy what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Louisa?
Well,
What best advice or worst advice did you receive, or
Okay.
inspiration that you would like to leave the group with?
talking of advices, I think that the first advices was from my father. I was the oldest, I was the daughter, and then came the brothers. But my father and mother, yes, never make a difference between boys and girls. The three were ruled by the same rules. And that was very important as you were growing up. Second, in high school, since I was the best student of the whole high school, then never I have any problems, because the motto that I have all my life since I started from second grade was, you have to work hard and you have to perform, you have to deliver. No excuses for anything. Never give an excuse that I don't like this, so I don't study, etc., etc. No, you just, if you have to study this, you do it very well. Then as a result of that, I was the first student, etc. Okay, I come to the university the same. I was one of the best students in the university also. And because the truth is, I like the fields. I like all the fields. As I said before, it's not something that I like math, but I don't like this, etc. No, I enjoy everything. And I enjoy literature as much as poetry, etc., as I enjoy math. Then, okay, I come to Berkeley. I was very fortunate because I arrived to Berkeley and got into a group that I was one of the boys. And that is unbelievable when I hear all the stories, especially in those times. I'm talking, I came to Berkeley in the 56, the 60s. And you start to hear, no, not the 60s, be honest, 55. And you start to hear all the stories about how much the women were segregated, etc. In this group, I was one of them. And as a result of that, I performed like one of them, I delivered like one of them, etc. Then everything was fantastic. until I arrived to Livermore. Okay, sorry about that again. They offered me a salary. I'm happy. I was so happy. I never thought that could be the difference among men and women's salaries. For me, I was a physicist with a PhD, just got it. I'm going to Livermore. And since I am Latin, I am very open and I'm always saying things. And we are at lunchtime with all our colleagues there, and came out the question of salaries. And of course, I say, yes, my offer was this salary. And they say, no, I cannot believe it. Yes. I saw that they would think that I was lying. No, that was my offer. That was my salary. Impossible. You cannot have offered that. What happened? That my salary was so low that they were terrified. And they say, finally one of them say, I will do something about it. And he went, and I got an increase of $200 or $300. Okay, that is us way behind. All these new students must have hopes that that will not happen now. And things will be, they are much, much better. Because at the lab, I have been the president, I have been the whatever president of the Women Association. And one of the issues that we took very seriously was salaries of the women at the lab and make a detailed students. And as a result of that, women these days are almost a la par, I will say, with men. And that's all. And things are very, very good now. But to people like me that they started way, way behind, has interesting experiences. Sorry about my honesty.
Honesty is the best policy, they say.
Yes, no, not always.
Can I throw in one more story?
Yes, I was just going to say we are at time, but I want to give the panelists one last chance for some parting shot. The stories are incredible. The struggles, the excitement, the sticking to it. This is just exactly the right kind of thing to be sharing so that the students understand, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. There's a long path ahead. So please, Claire.
Long but fun. This is a story that Lisa's comment brought to mind. When I first got to Livermore, they were paying me twice the salary that I was making as a postdoc. I thought, wow, I've died and gone to heaven. This is just terrific. And then, I didn't get any raises. And after 3 or 4 years without a raise, in my annual meeting with my boss, who admittedly was not that experienced at a boss, I said, Bill, how come I'm not getting any raises? And he pushed his chair back and he said, Claire, I'm so glad you asked. And I said, what? And he said, all the men in our group come to me every year at the annual performance appraisal. And they say, oh, you got to pay more money. I just had another child, or my car died, or my wife lost her job. And you got to pay me more. And so he did. And I never came to him and asked, so he didn't. And when I came to him and I asked, he gave me a big increase in salary. It was very simple. I just never asked for it. And it wasn't, it wasn't on people's minds in those days. So ask.
Amazing. I really hate to cut this off. I could spend time with each of you, and I know that you know each other and you would like to spend time. The chat is saying things like, all these stories are incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you. Amazing to hear your stories. But I have to cut it off. I can't thank you enough for taking time to be with us and sharing your stories. They couldn't have better role models than you. So thank you again. And with that, I have to turn it over to Sally for the wrap up.